Me and Kim christening the Spirit of God falling on us and blessing us. So thank you for that memory. And thank you for the invitation to be with you today. It is a special day for me. Today I am 63 years old. Yeah. And so when I was given the options of dates, it was actually the one that I had open. And also I thought this could be really fun to have this day. When you get to be 63, you start reflecting a little bit more when birthdays come your way. So maybe it'll be a little more reflective today since it being my birthday. But I want to tell you that every morning when I get up at Mars Hill, if weather permitting, I go and make my day, the beginning of my day, in the sanctuary of trees. So, who's been to my house here? Missy has. Missy can tell you. And they've grown 27 years. We've lived there 27 years. So there's a canopy of trees, and the majority of them are like white oaks and red maples and sugar maples, and we have flowering dogwood in our yard, and hemlocks on one end that are they're not looking too good. Locusts and many other varieties that thrive harmoniously together. And so I begin my prayer in the sanctuary of trees this way. The one thing I ask is that I make my home with you all the days of my life. And that in everyone I meet and everywhere I go, I see you, God, in all creation. This day, I seek the source of all being with all my heart. This day, I seek the eternal word with all my soul. And I seek the invigorating breath of God with all my strength and my might. And then I listen. I sit and listen to the trees, to those who dwell among the trees. And I listen for the voice of wisdom. One morning, after I had returned from an Alliance journey, which I have done quite a few in my 9 years, I've been doing this work with the Alliance, I stood among the trees, I raised my hands in gratitude and outstretched arms, and then I was shocked because I noticed that there were leaves missing in the canopy of trees. There was an opening, naked, dead branches in this opening, and the tree, though, when you looked at it at eye level, looked fine. You had to look all the way up to tell that it had died. So I was home the day the workers came to take it down. And there was one of the workers that scaled the tree and went like 60 feet up in the air. It was just really, really far. And he took down the tree limb by limb by limb. And it reminded me of how just a few years prior I had taught a Methodist children's confirmation class as part of my journey. I got to be a Methodist pastor on loan for a few years. And it reminded me of a diagram in the packet, the confirmation packet, of all the branches of the church when I saw those limbs falling one by one. Because looking at those branches of the church, I really learned teaching confirmation in the Methodist church how young we all are as Baptists. And, how think about my 63 years, 400 years of Baptists and my 63 years. Well, how young we are as Protestants, actually. Young we are as Baptists in that long tradition, and how young I am. And then also the Alliance, the 30-some years of the Alliance of Baptists. And then after the tree was cut at its base, when the trunk fell, the ground shook. Now maybe you've been having where a tree has fallen before, but it was an astonishing experience to feel the ground shake. And then when they all cleared away, when they got all the limbs gone and the workers left, I went and I counted the rings, and it was over 150 years old. So looking at this tree at eye level, it did look fine. It really did. But on closer look, it was dead at its core. So then, you know, I've wondered about all of it. I've applied that to all aspects of my life in thinking about, are there ways and beings and attitudes and worldviews and theologies and patterns in my life that are really unproductive and lifeless and dying and that I haven't taken the time to examine or maybe even resisted examining? How about even in the systems in which we live and work? The parts of culture and society that we occupy, that we benefit from, that are there parts of the church that are diseased and dead and dying and lifeless, and we've denied that and kept going. Our Alliance president now, Michael Ray Matthews, in 2015 invited me to go to a conference, one of the training conferences of the organization he works for. It was called PICO in 2015. They've changed their name to Faith in Action recently. And it's an organization that equips leaders in faith organizations to fight racism and make society more equitable. And so when Michael Ray asked, I wanted to go, and it was a tough week for me being a part of this training, because it was something that opened up new visions for me that I had not been exposed to with my white privileged life in the South. So I became much more aware of my whiteness, of privilege and power, of white supremacy. And I left that meeting, went back to the Alliance staff, and I told the Alliance staff, I urged the Alliance staff that we could no longer exist as if everything was healthy and well within the Alliance. So we have to examine our structures. We have to examine our systems, and we have to examine it all to remove what's dead and diseased and dying and choking our life and blocking equity for people of color within our organization and within church and society. It's an enormous task. It's an extremely enormous task to fully address the how things are isn't right, it isn't enough, and it's maybe even possibly there's some emptiness. It's a really enormous task. The way we've existed our entire history as a nation, the way we've existed our entire history as Baptists, in the 63 years of my life, in the over 30 years of the Alliance, is meaningful, life-evoking, transformative change possible? Is it really possible for you, for me, for our schools, for our governmental structures, for our institutions that we've given birth to and benefited from? So the preacher in me couldn't help but just read the gospel text to see if there was any way this story I'm telling you might connect with the gospel text. And I thought that just perhaps that it does, because this task of finding the dead wood and taking out the dead wood and the dead trees in our lives and our institutions and the places that we live and work and move may not be any more overwhelming than it was to these disciples who were given the task of feeding 5,000 people. Because they were given the assignment. I mean, that wasn't a huge task to think of. And they started, though, with what they had, is what I saw in the text. They started with what they were holding within their hands. They started with what collectively among themselves they had, and they used it to satisfy hunger and provided hope and healing in a context that seemed really impossible. So as followers of Jesus, I'm called that we collectively pull our energies together to create a future where there doesn't appear to be one. But that's who we're called to be and what we're called to do. To create a future where one can't even be seen. And the energy source for that future or possibility is love. It's radical love. Love that connects us. Love that empowers us. Starting with where we are, our own location, our 1 acre. That's about how big my yard is. It's about an acre. We start with the acre on which we live, and we practice at a small scale what we want to see at a universal level. And all that we touch, we change. And all that we change changes us. But you want to know what happened in my yard? I even have taken down some more trees because I liked what happened when that tree came down. You see, I lived in a yard that had all shade. We couldn't grow anything that needed sun. So when that tree died, it opened up the possibility for all this new life in my yard. And we decided we needed more light. So we've taken down more trees. And last year's acorns turned into new trees. Losing the oak tree didn't mean the end of trees in my yard at all. It gave the possibility for new trees to have growth and to have more life. It meant that there's an opening where light could enter and new growth could emerge. So let me tell you, I'm about cutting out branches that block our view of the horizon. And I'm for listening and learning from one another and from the trees and from those who dwell in the trees. Listening and learning about how white supremacy and white privilege blocks our health and our wholeness, and about planting new trees. Planting new trees that flourish as they have access to more light. We are creating a future, you and I, a future with love at its core, reshaping our lives, reshaping our organizations, 1 acre at a time, with what we have right there available to us, to make life more equitable, 1 meal at a time, 1 day at a time, 1 tree at a time. May it be so, my friends, with you and with me. Amen.
Amen.